When I went to the Reserve Bank of India and I said, don't bring a single North American macro monetary person to advise you. They did, and they themselves said, I remember Shamala Gopinath, who was the big power behind the throne. She was a deputy governor. This is at a time India had deputy governors who were women, long before they, in England and all that. I mean, I don't even think we have had either a deputy governor or a governor who's female. I mean, so she said, we did a better job in India than all these, highfalutin monetary and macroeconomists in the West with all their crazy modeling, because their models are insufficient in detail, which you could then fill in either with intuition, which is what they do in India. It's not because they've got fancy models, but they've got very strong intuitions about what is working and what is not.
Right.
And they're not overwhelmed by, if you can't show it in a model with, only certain models are given the time of day in the West. I found them not to be doctrinaire at all. They're not ideologues. They're very pragmatic. And if they said, they're not completely awed by, when we had the credit default swap mathematics, if they didn't understand it or it doesn't make any common sense, right?
Yeah.
They just ban it.
Is that coming from a difference into where their economists are being educated at university? Is it different in the knowledge that, or the skill sets that they're being implemented with in comparison to some developed economists, like say, Harvard for the States or Oxford, Cambridge, LSE from the UK?
I'll tell you, there's a very interesting thing that's happened to the UK economics. I mean, UK economics, firstly, we are under a heavy burden of what's called research excellence framework. And there are no original thinkers, in my opinion. When I first came to England in the late 80s and so on, it was still, we could still think about a Hayek or a Keynes or, very big original thinkers like Karl Popper. Somebody said, the person who hired me at University of Essex, somebody called Tony Shorrocks, he said in the 1950s, 60s, and even 70s, you walk into somebody's lecture and they can rearrange your brain because, they're original thinkers. So you need a certain amount of mojo, intellectual confidence to put out your ideas out there, and have it. But that's all disappeared. We began to scissor and paste from North American macroeconomics. That was the downfall of British macro thinking. The British are some of the best strategists. They wouldn't have become the colonial masters of their day if they didn't have huge amounts of strategy and common sense, and they muddle along. This is something where, they're not necessarily ideologues, they are pragmatists, They go for what works, and they are, whereas what happened in North American macro is they became ideologues about a certain type of thinking and model, and in particular rationality, which, I'm challenging, the idea of rationality completely bogus. They think that the only thing we should do is you do the best from what you know. So that's called searching under the lamppost. And I'm saying the way we've become intelligent is not by thinking about what we already know. We are actively trying to work out, basically because we are in this adversarial game, we are trying to work out what the enemy is going to do vis-a-vis your own actions. And therefore you have to anticipate what they have to do. And we have astronomical capabilities, 10 to the power 20, 20 to the power 30, capability of thinking outside the box. Now, you never hear that sort of rationality being talked about in their narrow idea of what is rational. So why are we doing that? Because sometimes, there is a Nash equilibrium in which we are forced to play a novel strategy, which was not on your original action set.